I'm
All right,
settling in.
we're golden. There's nobody currently watching, but that's okay. We can talk amongst ourselves here.
It's going to be recorded, right?
Yes, definitely. It is recording as of now.
Cool.
Yeah, but oh yeah, Seth, I see you're also monitoring the Slack channel. I'll just keep an eye on Twitter as well to see if any questions come in there. One thing about rebooting is that I lose all my logins. So I have to log into everything.
I do want to point out that Alyssa is currently away dealing with a family pet problem, unfortunately. And I also heard from Maggie, I think, who said that she is in a different time zone and is probably asleep right now. So I think we should probably, the questions that we talk about, we should take notes and maybe have them write their answers or add an addendum to their statement or however they want to answer them as well. But they are not missing on purpose. They wanted to be here as well.
Yep. So I did start a document with just some questions to maybe, if we run out of other questions, maybe we can use that to just take notes. I'll post the link actually here in the Hangout. I'm assuming that since you're all on Hangouts, you're also willing to use a Google document.
Okay, just today.
So maybe, Ian, did you have a specific way in mind to kind of get this started?
I think I'm glad that you wrote some questions down. That was something I forgot to do. We didn't get any from outside to start off with. So I think what we should do is the last time we did a candidate town hall, we basically introduced ourselves. I suppose we could probably just breeze really quickly through that because we kind of, well, you should go as quickly as you want. Keeping in mind that there's a lot of written words about who you are, and people who are interested in that can stalk you. And then also, we should just start from the top of the list and go through the questions one by one. So keep with that in mind. I'll start and introduce myself as Ian Dees this time. I am the current treasurer of the OpenStreetMap US board, and I'm running for the board again. I've been a part of the board for several years and have participated in OpenStreetMap since 2006. Yeah, my interest in participating in the board is trying to figure out ways to use the resources that we have as a board and as a group of people to improve OpenStreetMap in the US. And I feel like this time around we'll do it. Let's see, Seth, you're the one closest to my box. Let's go.
Cool. So, okay, I am Seth Fitzsimmons. I'm running for the board for the first time. I've been involved with OpenStreetMap, or I've been, I guess, aware of OpenStreetMap since about 2009 or so, when I was working at Yahoo and got involved in WhereCamp and stuff. And the reason that I'm running for the board this year is that I've kind of said to myself that this is going to be my year of OpenStreetMap. for the last year or so, I've been working pretty closely with the American Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations. I've also gotten involved with some government agencies casually, but a little more than casually in some cases. And I want to see if I want to find ways to further that. And I feel like the board is a good way to do that. I guess my fundamental motivation is empowerment. And open data is really about empowering people that can consume that data. And OpenStreetMap is one specific form of open data that can be used to empower people. And it's not just the consumption of the data, it's the creation of the data. People have all sorts of different motivations around it. So yeah, I would like to find ways within the board to empower the community and to grow the community and to expand the impact. Next is Martijn. He's right up next to Ian. So Tag, you're it.
Okay. I think everybody's in random order in this, because for me it's totally different, but I'm happy to next. I've been on this board for a little while and decided to run again after kind of carefully considering that, because I am, in a way, like I'm in favor of limiting the terms in a way. And in defiance of that, I decided to run again just because I felt like this is there's still a lot of to participate in as a board member. I think I still have things to contribute, and I don't quite know how to make that work with the term limits, because I feel like it should be somehow come to an end for everyone, a natural end. I'm just not sure what that. I was just not confident that that end had naturally come for me yet. So as to my motivations to want to serve another term, I'm also on the OpenStreetMap Foundation board since this year, and I see in many ways as a sort of a, to put it in a maybe less respectful way, sort of playground for things, or testing ground for things that could happen at the global level. For that reason, I would want to kind of explore the relationships between OSM US and OSM Foundation, perhaps becoming an official chapter and see what that actually means, because the official chapters are, I don't know how meaningful that relationship is, and I want to work from the foundation part also to define that a little bit better. And then things that I know the foundation is already interested in, like a grants program that we are developing that I think could be super useful. They're interested in learning about that, learning from that. I think there's other things that we do that the foundation is also interested in doing. Lastly, I would like to take something on that we have for a while, which is making a new website that's really going to be functioning more as a community hub. That's something pretty big to undertake, because I want it to be good, but that's something that I'd really like to, as a tangible thing, I'd like to take on next year. That's a bit about me. Thanks. Next, well, I'm the last on my own list. I'll just tag Brandon to go next.
All right, I'll go next. Hi everyone, I'm Brandon. This is my first time running for the board. I've been involved with OpenStreetMap since 2012. Actually, the first event I ever went to was actually State of the Map in Portland, because I knew almost nothing about OSM before going to that. And that first time I went, I found everyone really welcoming. And after that, I kind of segued into doing more professional work around OSM. So right now I have a small business doing software development, and a lot of it is OpenStreetMap related. I guess I'm kind of like Seth in that I wanted to set aside some time for myself this year to focus more. So I'm learning about things like OSM in the community. So that's why I decided to run for the board this year. I guess I'll keep it short and sweet. So that's all I had. I believe the last is Brian. Is that correct?
Yep. Okay, I'm Brian DeRocher, and I've been involved with OpenStreetMap since about 2009. I'm in the DC area, so I'm following on the heels of Kate Chapman and Andrew Turner and Serge Ruklowski. And they all moved on to greater pastures, and I kind of filled in the gap running their little group here called Mapping DC. So we try to aim to improve OpenStreetMap in the DC area. So I've been running that for a couple of years, and I've got a lot of help from volunteers around, like Stephen Johnson and Andrew Wiseman and Brandon Knight. I'll try to distinguish myself from the other candidates. I don't have a mapping job. I'm a software developer, a contractor for the federal government, and I've been doing this work for about 14 years. I've worked with GSA, FAA, and USPS. So I don't really have any sort of personal reasons to support OpenStreetMap. I do it, just for fun, and I don't have any sort of ego. I'm not coming here with an ego. I'm just trying to help out. I have no shame in asking for help. I'm kind of new here at this level, so I have no shame in asking for help, and it's not like I have any sort of investment here. I also feel like, as you others do, that this year is different. I think with the election cycle turning the way it did, that we all feel that there's a stronger need for open data and open and free data. And I think we could use OpenStreetMap to support the other organizations around us, like Code for America, to do any sort of analysis. And I think we're going to need that as a country. So that's about it for now. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
That is a interesting point to bring up. I think that we might want to, I'm trying to figure out a question to ask. That's a really good point to bring up about the election in the US, that just the national election. And there's a lot of Twitter tweets floating around about folks trying to mirror federal data because of worries about the next president. I wonder, is there anything that, how do we view the OpenStreetMap US relationship with government? I wonder if we've previously had folks from the federal government, folks like the Census Bureau and the DOT and others at State of the Map US events and at other mapping events, not necessarily related to OpenStreetMap. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about what we think our relationship with the government is. Do you guys think that we should try to reach out to them more? Do you think we should work with local governments more than federal, or do you view OpenStreetMap US, the organization, as just working solely on the OpenStreetMap community? So that, I guess that's a question for Brian.
So I see OpenStreetMap not as necessarily supporting the government, but supporting the citizens and the people in the United States. That's not limiting to the government. I mean, I'd like to help out the government too, but there are issues there with licenses and sharing data with the government because, I mean, I'm not quite sure about this, but it seems like it enters the public domain, and it just, it wouldn't be compatible. But we'd have to think about that a little bit. So just to wrap up, I mean, I think we're here really to support the citizens, and not just the citizens of the United States, but the citizens of the entire world. Oh, that looks like a good idea.
Sure.
Hey, can I interrupt for one quick second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is your dog all right?
Yeah, she sleeps upside down.
Okay. And one more thing. Where's Richard?
Richard did not respond to this. That's a good question. We should try and poke him and see if he's around. In the meantime,
I may have his phone number. Let me see if I can reach him.
Okay.
I had a couple of things I wanted to say about that. Working with government and with government data was one of the things that I covered a bunch in my manifesto. So it's obviously something that's important to me. And like Brian was saying about the licensing piece, I've come to the licensing debate not from the point of view of a for-profit company, but from the point of view of government agencies and local agencies that are trying to find ways to incorporate open data and OpenStreetMap specifically into their process. And I see the license issues that you're bringing up, where data can go into OpenStreetMap, but it can't come out in the public domain, so it can't be redistributed by those agencies. And I've heard that actually directly from people at the Forest Service. So to Ian's question about whether we should be working with the larger government agencies or if we should be working with local agencies, personally, I don't think the answer really matters. I think that if we can find small groups of passionate people at either scale of organization, I think that that's the most appropriate place to start. Because if we're finding people who are already bought into the idea of open data and the idea of contributing to a greater commons rather than multiple siloed commons, I think that we have a greater likelihood of being able to push things forward. I'm reminded of a talk by SNCF, which is the French National Rail Agency at State of the Map in Brussels, where they originally started pursuing OpenStreetMap data to expose accessibility. And since then, they've discovered that it has implications all around their organization. So I feel like we can use it, almost as a wedge, where if we can find people who are passionate proponents of it, we can work with them effectively. And there have been efforts in the past, and that just shows that it's really fertile ground, and maybe they haven't worked in the past. Maybe we haven't talked to the right people, maybe we haven't learned the right lessons from people, and I think we should keep doing that and keep trying and seeing what sorts of new lessons we can learn. I think that it's going to be even more important in the coming administration to support the government workers, the people who actually work at these agencies and are career employees, because they're just trying to get their jobs done in the most efficacious way possible. And personally, and I think I speak for everybody within the OpenStreetMap community, I believe that open data is a really good way to get there. I'll pass this on to whoever else wants to pick up.
Well, let's give Richard a chance to introduce himself. He just joined, so maybe we should step back and have him make a quick introduction first. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Welcome.
Hi there. Apologize for being late. I've had a very busy and distracting day. Is my microphone working?
It's okay. We're glad to. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to check. I've seen a lot of that not working on these online chats recently. Yeah, I been a member of the US chapter from the beginning. I was a member of the founding board way back at the beginning, and served one term as president right before our host tonight, who succeeded me. And since I saw that we were short of board members, I was thinking I hadn't really intended to run again, but I am willing to do so. So I thought I would throw my name in. But as some of you may have noticed, I have not written a really detailed manifesto. I am simply slammed for time right now because I am going back to grad school in January, PhD in computer science.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Well, we'll see.
Where are you going? Where are you getting it?
University at Albany. I have a relationship with the department because I've been teaching there as an adjunct in computer science for 3 years, and it's been a little bit weird because I've been supervising master's projects for students when I don't have a master's.
Good. I wish you luck. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know.
So we were just talking a little bit about how we view OpenStreetMap collaborating with government. And I guess I just wanted to quickly point out that that government users are part of the OpenStreetMap community as well. And so I do think we should include them when we're thinking about it, but they shouldn't be the only people we think about. Did anybody else want to touch on that, or we can move on to another topic?
Well, I'd like to actually say something since I got a little hint of what was being talked about there.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a lot of government interest in doing stuff. In particular, I participate in the New York State GIS list, which is just a general mailing list of lots and lots of people in New York State doing GIS, mostly government people. And, you know, I think that I'm listening to things that they want to do. And I think that at one level, we want to encourage it, them bringing in good quality data, but at the same time, we need to work out the correct mechanisms for them to do that, because we have this ongoing issue where we have volunteer mappers who, for obvious reasons, get really unhappy when their stuff gets written over by somebody doing a great import. And so we kind of need to work on understanding how to meet everybody's needs in terms of managing the data. I know, for example, that when they brought Tiger into OpenStreetMap back in 2007, it got dumped on top a lot of small local mapping efforts, and the bulk of those mappers disappeared. And I think we need to take that as an early signal lesson that we need to be really careful when we do this. And so I think that we need, you know, there was a U.S. imports committee that Serge W. was running for a while, which has kind of fallen away. And it was never an official part of anything. But we had a bunch of really good conference calls with people working on imports, talking about how to make them work well and not be damaging, to make them into good imports. And that's an example of the kind of committee initiative where I think that expanding beyond what as OSM we do now, which is primarily the conference, which is great. But we need to look at more working groups like the imports working group and figure out how to encourage groups of OpenStreetMap people who are real thinkers about this stuff to work on improving our processes and managing our data better and all of that kind of stuff.
That's a good point. There are tons of government agencies and groups that want to participate in OpenStreetMap, and the way that they see that happening is by using their data, the data that they've already collected, and contributing that to OSM. So I think that's a good point to bring up. Somebody just asked on the YouTube chat, two pretty good general questions. One is, how many members are there in OpenStreetMap US? Actually, let's start with the other one. Is there a mechanism or legal setup to protect the license of OpenStreetMap? For instance, if a government agency redistributed OSM data, would a lawyer reach out to that agency? So there's an important point here that we should point out on this call, that OpenStreetMap US does not own or have any direct relation with the data. OpenStreetMap Foundation is a separate entity in the UK that deals with the legal aspect of OpenStreetMap, and they're the ones that hold the copyright and technically own the OpenStreetMap data. So when a legal question comes up, that's where we point the questions. They have a legal working group and a license mailing list and all sorts of resources there for people who are excited about that. OpenStreetMap US is a separate entity that's not officially related to OpenStreetMap Foundation quite yet, but the goal and the mission for OpenStreetMap US as it stands right now is to promote the OpenStreetMap in the United States. So having said that, this separate entity, OpenStreetMap US, has, I just had the number in my head and then I lost it. I think we have just under 200 active members right now. And by active, I mean they've paid in the last year. So that answers the two questions. I guess those aren't really candidate questions. Those are just kind of giving some background on our organization. So that kind of segues into a question for everybody. Why should anyone become a member of the US chapter? Our numbers have definitely gone down in the last year or so. We used to have just under 300, I think. And so I wonder, all of you guys, let's start with Brandon, maybe. What do you think the purpose of being a member of OpenStreetMap US is, and how could we improve on that?
So the purpose of membership, in my mind, is just to show support for something that's a shared resource, just like Wikipedia. And that's something I wanted to mention, and I also wrote on the wiki, which is that I think Wikipedia does a really good job of having these funding campaigns. I think in this case, it's a little bit more ambiguous because because there's so many organizations. Like there's the main OSMF and there's OSM US. So it's like if you wanted to donate to OSM, in which way would it go? Like, would it go to OSM US? Should you donate to OSM Foundation? So I think that that question of like raising money is sort of ambiguous to me, and I'd like to explore so like ways to make it better. But in general, I feel like for individuals to become members, it's usually so because they support just OSM. I think there's another thing to be said for corporate members. So we should encourage large organizations that use an OSM map or an OSM derived product to actually become members. But there's also the question of, so if you're a corporate member, does that also have benefits? And I think right now that's also not super clear. So I know that was sort of all over the place answer, but I'd be interested if anyone else has anything to say.
Brandon, I pretty much agree with what you're saying. It's a way for people to say, yeah, I'm part of the community. It's like the people who carry cards that say I'm in the ACLU. It's to tell other people that I support these causes. You know, I'm with you. I'm part of the family. And it's also a way to share resources and get resources, you know, for your own benefit too.
I'm going to dissent slightly here. I think that maybe the thing that we need to do is reach out to the members of OSM US and ask them if they think there are things we should be doing. There are things, you know, we may or may not be able to do most of them or even any of them, but we should at least ask the members, because I think that that will probably affect their attitude towards the organization, is just being asked.
Yeah, you guys have entirely summarized my position on it as well. The only thing that I would add to that is that it's an opportunity. So it's not about collecting money for the foundation. It's really more a demonstration of support, and particularly for the corporate members, it's a level of commitment that forces them to internally commit as well as externally commit. So you end up with potentially greater force on the inside to make things work. But yeah, I think that fundamentally people are members because they want to be part of something and to figure out what is the most effective way to achieve whatever their personal goals are, or whatever goals they've identified within the community that they believe in.
Maybe I have a little bit to add here. I always thought of this. I have this very lofty objective of reaching some sort of democracy where we, as a board, whoever gets to sit on it next year, has a mandate from a significant chunk of the OpenStreetMap community. We don't really know that word community is pretty poorly defined, and we don't even really know how many people identify as being part of it here in the US. I think it would be nice to have a better sense of what that is, and I think one way to do it is to give people a more of a reason to be a member. I think interesting people might come out of the woodwork to identify themselves as members. Those benefits don't have to be like super elaborate. It can just be you receive a monthly you get $10 discount to State of the Map US or a regional event. We haven't really worked that out yet. Still, it's been on our agenda for a little while. I would love to define that a little bit better. And also, the members to me are a resource. It goes both ways. So they tell us by being a member who should be on the board and what and how we should evolve as an organization. But also, we can ask them things. We can poll them. We can leverage their opinions, their intelligence, their kind of hive mind to figure out where we should go.
Yeah.
A bit more of a sort of a direct democracy type model.
Yeah, some of the best ideas come from places you don't even know about. You know, there's hundreds of people out there with great ideas, and sometimes they bubble up and sometimes they don't. It's unfortunate that we're not tapping that resource as well as we could. It would be nice that if there was a fountain of ideas and people with ideas sharing them with us, like we should do this and we should do that. And it would only be up to us to say, yeah, there's a lot of great ideas. Let's do this one, or let's do that one. And I think we should encourage that. We should encourage feedback much more.
I think that's a really good segue to what I was thinking about for this answer, which was the OpenStreetMap US board, and to some extent the OSMF as well, are led by people who are really busy, and it would be really cool to have the community members and the folks who are interested enough in our organization to pay to make sure that they participate in the governance and the running the organization and leading the ideas and implementation of the ideas. I think that is something that neither organization does really well, and especially OSM US could do better for sure. Yeah. So I agree. Getting folks to give us ideas and generate a fountain of interest, I think that would be a really interesting thing. I don't think that OSM US is using the resource of its membership very well. I think we could do a much better job there.
That seems like a really good segue into the other question about how would you spend $50,000 to help OSM in the US? Because we're talking about resourcing, and we're talking about people, and we can talk about money.
Yep, that's a really good point. I think one of the things that the most recent board, the board that's on its way out right now, has been thinking about is hiring somebody to assist the general day-to-day operation of OSM US, so that the board has more time to give advisory and drum up support from the community for ideas to work on improving the community. So, for example, we could have somebody who coordinates the State of the Map US event and takes the lead on a lot of the more nitty-gritty stuff. I spend a lot of my time doing bookkeeping and paying people and receiving payments and making sure all that stuff is squared away. And it would be great to alleviate the time that I do have for OpenStreetMap US and work on other things that are more directly improving the general community. So that's one thing, hiring somebody. I'd be really interested to hear what other folks have in mind.
So many of us are very technically capable. Like I think most of us here write code. But I don't think as a board member that's our job really to sling code. We should really try to delegate that out to people who have the time to sling code. I mean, I know Martijn builds these great tools, and I think it's unfortunate that he's encumbered by the board because he's building such great tools for the community. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I am in that position as well. I have lots of things. I have a to-do list, dozens of things long that are related to OpenStreetMap that I would love to have the time to work on. It would be great if Martijn and I and everybody else who had ideas like that could come up with a way to delegate that stuff off, and we could work together to make that better and get those things done.
Yeah, Brian mentioned the fountain of ideas. So what I'm thinking is that if we had $50,000 to spare or some amount of money, what we could do is we could take that fountain of ideas and put it to the membership and create some sort of a grant program that would subsidize people that are working in their spare time or that are freelancing or whatever to put together prototypes of things that are coming out of the fountain, and then keep some of it in reserve so that we could take those projects to the next level, to be cliche about it.
Yeah.
But to make sure that it's not just funding for a prototype, but there's actually funding for follow through. And then also that we, the board, and people within working groups or that have connections within organizations that can financially support these things, that we can try and find them homes elsewhere so that they can really become more sustainable endeavors. I mean, I know that Telenav supports Map Roulette tremendously, and it seems like it would be very difficult for Map Roulette to be quite as valuable as it is if Martijn had to do it entirely in his spare time.
Yeah, I like that idea of turning that fountain into a fountain of money, albeit like in small chunks. But that reminded me that someone who was running, one of the candidates who was running for the OpenStreetMap Foundation elections that also were happening this past week, had a similar idea, and it really inspired me to think about just to think about this question, because it is a real question that we have for the board, and I think this is. I can only concur that this would be a fantastic idea to pursue, to turn, to kind of enable people to do things that otherwise could never, could be very hard to do.
I think that there's another interesting question, and there are OpenStreetMap related side projects all over the place, lots of them. Some of them have infrastructure requirements that they have difficulty meeting, and the question is whether or not there might be a useful function helping to support these projects. The example that is on my mind right now, because OpenHistoricMap has been down for many months, and OpenHistoricMap's not coming back until they find a new server somewhere to put it on. And that's aggravating to me, and I want that to move forward, but I'm in no position to supply OpenHistoricMap with a server, so I can't move them any further either. And not that I'm proposing that OSMUS would take that on, but that is a kind of a problem out there where people have ideas that need infrastructure support, and it's difficult to get.
I have a question. Who's heard of 18F inside GSA?
Yep.
Most people. So you know that they have like feature bounties. So there's like all of their projects are open source, right? And they want to get the community to participate. So they set up like not a bounty, but like a micropayment. They say, we want this feature. And then there's an auction among people to say, I could do that for $300. I could do that for $200. And then that person is granted, the right to build the software. Well, I wonder if we could adopt something similar. Like we could take our $50,000 and we could say, well, we really need this feature in Map Roulette or whatever. And if you could build it and it satisfies our requirements, we will give you this stipend or this money.
Yep.
That's a great idea. I think that's something that has kind of stifled that kind of idea and has kind of made stuff like hiring really difficult is finding basically coordinating that effort of running those kind of things and finding the right people to hire and that kind of thing. There's a certain amount of like back office kind of getting that stuff set up that needs to be set up. But once it does get set up, then I think that would be a really interesting and really probably useful thing.
Well, we could just take advantage of the 18F's code to do that because it's open source.
Yeah, totally.
So,
well, it does raise the question of who we are in terms of determining what's valuable. And I think that, and back at a previous startup, we were talking about granting people essentially chits where they could put their money where their mouth was. So if each of the members had some way of voting with their feet, both in terms of actually doing the work, but also supporting it in some way. So each person has the ability to grant $250 or something like that. And they can put it toward a project that they feel is worthwhile, something on that order.
That's interesting that you bring that up because Brian Housel, one of the Mapboxers, the person who works on ID, I think he pointed out on the OpenStreetMap website GitHub today, actually, I think, that it would be interesting to have feedback exactly like that, where OpenStreetMap users would get 3 or 5 votes or something like that, and then they would suggest new features and then vote on them with their 3 or 5, and those votes would then float feature ideas up to the top. So that would be an interesting thing to try, just to see where people's minds are. Maybe there's things that people are excited about that we don't even know about.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the things that I like when I think about kind of a direct democracy where people have a direct voice and are not don't feel that they are dealing with some sort of anonymous entity that is OpenStreetMap that they can't change. I mean, I remember how I started in 2007, I think, and I thought about, even though it was very small back then, I thought of OpenStreetMap as this entity that was already established and I couldn't change. And I quickly found out that it was not the case, but not through any kind of inviting interface or opportunity, that just because I persevered. And I think in today's reality where OpenStreetMap is pretty huge, it is very welcome to have kind of tools in place where you can have more direct democracy. And we already have some. Like Slack has been pretty good for us. GitHub is good for us, but still tools that are not there for everybody. So I think that's why I see a big role for a good website for us. Ours is a little bit outdated, where people can actually be directed to ways to participate more directly other than becoming a member, which is what we do now, pretty much.
We have a question from John Schluss on the, I hope I said that right, on the YouTube chat for Brandon, who you mentioned earlier that there are some communities outside GIS and mapping that we could reach out to. Can you give some examples of those kind of communities that you'd be interested in reaching out to?
Yeah, I have a couple in particular, especially students that are in architecture school or urban planning school. Like a lot of them have needs that revolve around it's like GIS data, but they're much less connected to things. So they're much less connected to things like OpenStreetMap, so like compared to, for example, a computer science or GIS student. And I think it's really a question of exposure. Like there's not a lot of awareness in those communities. And I think there's lots of like historical reasons for that. But I think there is an opportunity to expand so the user base of OSM more into those areas. It's something, I actually had a presentation at State of the Map in 2015 that was sort of along these lines. But that's the one community that I think about the most. I think there's also some more that are pretty well served by OSM, such as in like accessibility for people that need to, yeah, I'm thinking of map, for example, so like buildings in the area that are ADA accessible. That's like a big focus right now in OSM, but I think there's still more like awareness and outreach to be done there.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
I think that there's a little bit of prior art there. I've noticed that there are a lot of geography people more on the cartography side that have come into OpenStreetMap in the last year. It really hit me hard when we were at the UN in New York last year. I started seeing a lot of people that I'd previously seen at NASIS, and I would attribute that largely to probably Migursky and Kelso's involvement at NASIS over the years, but then other people as well. And I think that it's another example where the cartography students or the geography students that are studying cartography have a need for this sort of data, but they didn't necessarily have a way to get it, and they're starting to understand how the sausage gets made, and they're discovering that it's something that they can be more involved in, rather than just pulling data from all of the beautiful government sources we have. Yeah, so I think that we've seen some of that, and the way that that's happened is by finding kind of strategic people within those communities. Nathaniel Kelso was on the NASIS board for a few years, so he definitely brought the OpenStreetMap world with him. So if we could find ways to get involved with architecture students, to find people within the community to guest lecture, to attend conferences, just to get them aware, because awareness is really the first step.
That is a good segue into State of the Map US, which is currently our #1 thing that we do. We spend a lot of time on that and a lot of money, and it's basically the main contact point that people have with OpenStreetMap US. I'd be interested to hear what everybody has thoughts on State of the Map US and how we should proceed with that. Richard, do you want to start with that or pass it on? You're muted currently.
Yeah, I was just noticing that the mute was on. I really have been very impressed with the evolution of State of the Map US, and I'm not sure that it's possible that there are ways that we could improve on things, but I kind of feel like it's pretty much on track. The main weakness is that it is the primary focus of OSM US, and I think we really need to develop a broader base without messing with State of the Map US so much. In other words, I think we ought to use it as a base for leverage to just do bigger things during the year. We might consider how we can encourage more local communication among mappers. We had one map time here in Albany, and then the whole thing disappeared. And I'm really unhappy that it hasn't gone forward, because I felt like there's a lot of value in communicating. And OSM, the State of the Map US shows us that at a very high level. And I feel like we should look at it and say we need to do more of this. And I'm just rambling here because I didn't really have any coherent thoughts on the subject. But I remember the first State of the Map US, which was in Atlanta in 2009. I'm sure Ian does too. Sitting there in the front row, aiming his Android phone in order to try and live stream the talks. There were basically about 40 of us in a room, in a tiny corner of the huge convention center. And so, talking to Kate at the UN, it's like she and I looked around at all the people, and she just said, it's hard to believe what's happened since we started this thing. So I'm a big fan of keeping State of the Map US on an upgoing track. I didn't manage to make last year, so I don't know how it compared to the UN, but I'm pretty happy with how it's been going.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's been several years, and it's been not always increasing, but it's been big every time. I think one of the things that we tried to do last year was make State of the Map US a more local community-run event. And I think that I feel like we should go back to working on working towards a huge event like the UN again, while also promoting and working with community to build smaller events at the same time. My hope was that by having smaller community-run events, we could have more of them in a year than just one State of the Map US. And we just kind of ran out of steam and time as a OSM US board to pull that off. But I would hope that we could figure out a way to pull that off. I feel like there's enough interest and enough people spread around the country that we should be able to pull that off, while also doing the big one at the same time.
I like your point about local organization, because one of the things about the last couple of State of the Map US is that has concerned me, and I didn't go to last year, so I did not see the local control thing happen there. I'm used to being a member of organizations like the Sports Car Club of America and the Alfa Romeo Owners Club, where there are very, very strong local groups. And so when their conventions and meetings occur, the local groups are putting them on, and it's just kind of on a rotating basis, group to group. And that's something where we need to look at existing organizations like MapTime, which are working in some places and not others. They're not working in Albany right now. And consider whether or not we can look at building that kind of local organization. That's a really good thought there.
Brian, you had something to say?
Yeah, the State of the Map at the United Nations was monumental, right? But wasn't that because there was no State of the Map at the world level?
In part, I think there were a few reasons why it was as huge as it was. I mean, I think the location helped as well, and the fact that it's in New York City, where there's a lot of people in the vicinity who have an interest in JS and mapping and OSM. So yeah, I think a lot of things came together to make it as big as it was.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, that's great. But I agree with Richard. I think perhaps what we should do is take the lessons learned from previous State of the Maps and try to delegate that down to the host city. Find some good leadership there, and give them plenty of time to focus on just State of the Map. That'll alleviate time for us to focus on other things. And I think what we could do, Ian, you mentioned a couple other smaller events. What we could do is probably promote the mapathons, quarterly mapathons more often. I just in fact learned that another mapping group around DC, the one at GW, they have mapathons every month. Like, that's just amazing. But I think we could do something quarterly at a higher level, like much, broadcasted much wider.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I like all those ideas. I hear a lot about delegation. The foundation delegates State of the Map almost entirely to a working group that's very active. It's come up before, working groups. We've been fairly unsuccessful in getting those to work in a sustained fashion. We've had some budding initiatives, but I would really like to see that come to a little bit more fruition. And I think for us as a board, if I get to serve another term, it would be nice to be able to get some time to attract some people who are willing to commit some time to that, and B, give them the support that they require.
The support and the budget, right?
Right, of course, yeah, that too.
Well, I think your point about spending money, I think money would be well spent delegating a lot of the management of State of the Map, because it is something that I think we all, well, I agree is very much on track. And I believe that the community should be able to give guidance and the board should provide guidance. But actually managing the day-to-day of logistics could be paid. Somebody could be paid to do that.
I do just want to mention that we've, in addition to trying to lean on local groups, we also did try to pay somebody to work on doing the day-to-day, and that didn't work out this time. Unfortunately, State of the Map US only happens once a year, and so we can't really iterate very quickly on that. But we do try, or we did try. So I mean, that's something that has been in our minds for a while. It's just we haven't had a good chance to make that successful yet. Which kind of, Brandon, I want to make sure you had a chance to say something about State of the Map US. Did you have, I feel like maybe you said something.
I don't think I mentioned anything specifically about State of the Map, and I don't have a lot to add on that, so I'm happy to continue.
Okay. I wanted to, I guess I already said what I was going to say, so I'm going to stop talking.
So we are an hour in almost.
Yep.
I don't know how much time folks have. I would really want to one thing that I would really like to get people's opinion on, and that I didn't see a whole lot in the manifestos is diversity. It's a word that has been much used and much abused, perhaps. But I'm really curious as to, like, there's a lot of ways you can look at that, and I'm curious to hear how people understand it, if they think it's something that the board has a responsibility to support or encourage, and what do you think? Ian, why don't you start?
So I think diversity is something that OpenStreetMap US in particular has kind of taken the lead on, or tried to at least, in the OpenStreetMap community. I feel like, especially when it comes to State of the Map US stuff, we've tried really hard to do things like scholarships and outreach to make sure that we're hitting diverse communities, both in terms of race and gender and location, and as many different axes of diversity as we can think of. I think one thing that has kind of been in the back of my mind, especially as we talk more about State of the Map US, is that it would be great to do some more work around budgeting for State of the Map US, so that we could direct more money towards scholarships and bringing people in from the US into the state of the map so that they can participate and be inspired. Because I do remember one of the reasons I really like going to State of the Map US and I haven't actually been to State of the Map, but I really enjoy going to geo conferences in general, and especially State of the Map US, because it makes me excited to continue participating in the community, and it gives me ideas and it gives me contacts, and it gets me excited to work on some side project that I was working on. And I want to make sure that other people have that same feeling. And at OpenStreetMap in general is filled with a bunch of people who are working on their laptop or on their computer at home and not really together always. And so I think bringing people together like that is an important part. And diversity is a huge part of that, because we want to bring together as many people from different backgrounds as we can. I think that's something we should strive for. It should be something we think about always, not like a side thing that we think about as a group.
Ian, can I just add to what you were saying?
Yes, go for it.
So I personally don't know much about diversity, but I do follow a lot of TED Talks. And it seems like the science has shown that companies that are diverse outperform companies that were not diverse. They get rid of the groupthink, they have a lot of innovation, and they're more adaptive. So if we could bring that to OpenStreetMap US, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. OpenStreetMap could definitely use a wider range of less groupthink. Let's just say that.
I have to say I'm entirely in favor of what you guys have said to this point, and this is where I'm in a position where I do not know what the current state of this is with respect to OSM US, but something that we should have, if we don't, is a very, very clear statement of our policy about any kind of harassment at OSM US sponsored events.
Yeah,
and it should be a very clear statement about the fact that it's unacceptable and people will be expelled if they behave inappropriately.
That's a really good point. So State of the Map individual events have codes of conduct, but I'm not sure that OpenStreetMap in general has one, and that would be a good thing to pull together. Yeah, I don't see anything on our website, but we definitely should. That's a good point. So we are kind of running past our 60 minutes here. Does anyone want to, I feel like we should kind of come to a close, and let's maybe just talk really quickly, like a few sentences about just an overview of why we're running, and kind of a closing statement. I'll start off at the left this time with Brandon.
Sure, in closing, so I personally would like to get more involved with OSM. I think a lot of the ideas we talked about are really great. I'm most excited about some of the things we mentioned around, so like having grants for tools and also building new tools to better communicate. And then there's one random idea that I wanted to mention, which is, I think this might have been done in the past, but having like a map making competition that's tied into State of the Map would be an interesting way to attract people that are interested in maps. And I think it'd be cool, for example, if the criteria for the winner was not who has the most beautiful map necessarily, but whose map makes the best specific use of OSM data. You know, because I think it's really important as an organization to articulate to people using or contributing to OSM, like what OSM is and why it is different or better than those proprietary like map solutions. Because I think now we're so like, in the past 10 years since, around that, since OSM started, like there's so many other proprietary solutions, and to a layperson, you tell them what OSM is and they're like, oh, so, why would I need that? So I think like that aspect of outreach and also communicating to new mappers is something that I don't have a definitive answer to how I'm going to change that, but it's something I'm interested in working on as the board. Thanks.
I think, Brian, you are next.
Okay. So my closing statement is this. What I've seen in the past years at OpenStreetMap OSMF and OpenStreetMap US is sort of like a laid back position. Let the community do what they want to do. But I think this is baloney. I think it's our job to really set a vision for the next year or the next maybe 2 years, and set specific and smart goals that we're going to try to achieve and try to disseminate those goals throughout the community. I mean, we're not telling people what to do, but we're saying, hey, we're focused this way, and if you want to join us, that'd be great. So that's my closing statement. I think we should set a direction and try to gather support for that. Thank you.
Martijn.
Wait, I'm the last person on this row. But anyway.
So the secret to Hangouts is that it's alphabetical, but you are always the lower right corner.
The person who's looking at the screen. Okay. Anyway, so I feel really good after this chat. Like whoever is going to be on the next board, regardless if it's like regardless of the configuration, I think it's going to be a very good group of people. It's very unfortunate that not all of us could make it, but I do feel very good about whoever gets to populate the new board, and I will continue to support it regardless of the outcome. To me personally, like I don't really have much more to add. I think we had a really good conversation with important topics. If I get elected, I won't be working on State of the Map US as much, just because I think there's better ways to spend our time. That's not a threat. It's just an observation that I want to make public, and that's where I'll leave it. Thank you very much.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think my name shows up as OpenStreetMap, so I'm next. In closing, I think I agree with everybody who just talked. I've always thought that OpenStreetMap US has done a much better job of being forward with its opinion and making progress when OpenStreetMap Foundation has been more laid back. I feel like that's an okay dichotomy, and I think that OpenStreetMap US there's room in the OpenStreetMap community for some organization to take a lead and move things forward. And I like to see OpenStreetMap US in that position. I also agree with Martijn that I think we should do everything we can to make State of the Map US just work. We've done it several times, and it should just be a thing that we do now. And I think one of the ways that we might be able to pull that off is by hiring somebody, but also relying more on local volunteers to pull that off. And then finally, I think along the lines of the volunteers and activating the community to do things, I think having more chats like this. Martijn, you used to have Mappy hours on Google Hangouts. I think something like this where we get together regularly and remind each other that there's a community of people who are excited about OpenStreetMap. I think that would help reinvigorate the OpenStreetMap community in the US. And I think we should do everything we can to make that happen again. So there you go. I think Richard, you're next. Me too.
You say so. I just typed in, but I really miss Mappy Hour, and I felt like the import U.S. committee calls were a really effective use of the time of the people who were on that committee. And I think these are the kinds of things that, we need to be revitalizing part of our communication. I think rebuilding communication with the community is a good part of working on the membership issues that concern us. It's a way to find out what they want. So, I'm all for that. I will say something very similar to what many of you have said, which is that based on this call tonight, because I know some of you pretty well and I know others of you less well, but I think however the election turns out, the organization will continue to be in good hands. So nice job, everybody, tonight. I will probably have more time now that I'm in grad school because I need things to do in order to avoid working on a dissertation.
That's a good priority. Go for it, Seth.
Okay, so my mantras recently have been sustainability and momentum, which are not always compatible with one another, but I think that they can feed off of one another. And I'd like to both be able to join the board in furthering those goals and achieving those goals, but also using the board selfishly to help me move forward there. And I think that these are all things that benefit OpenStreetMap, the thing, OpenStreetMap, the community, open data, the movement, et cetera. The other thing that I think is very important to me this year, the other thing that is very important to me for this year, sorry, there's a water fountain next to me, is actually to hold the membership accountable to their organization. We are all members of something that we believe in, but we can't just sit back and watch while others who we don't even know if anyone's going to step up to do anything. And I think that the job of the board is to be the locomotive at the front of it, but not be the locomotive at the back of it, to rely on the community to drive much of it, which is one of the reasons that I want to make sure that everyone that goes to State of the Map US is a member of the OSM board, of the OSM US board, probably the OSMF board as well. But because it really is I'm looking at YouTube, it's your organization, it's not ours. And what we do with it is up to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Let's see here. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I want to point out to the 2 people who are currently watching and anybody who watches the stream later that voting is happening via email. And if you have not received a ballot from a place called limequery.com, you should check your membership or email the board at openstreetmap.us and we'll get you sorted. That ballot runs until Sunday, sometime, I think we said midnight. So if you have not voted yet, please let us know. And thank you for asking questions and participating. 11:59, sorry. Shortcut for midnight. Thanks everybody for participating.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.